Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at the Beretta Model of 1934. Now, I've done videos on a number of the predecessors and kind of the weird versions of this pistol, but we never actually looked at the standard normal model, and this seems to be as good a time to do it as any because a whole bunch of these have arrived in the United States, and they are remarkably cheap right now. So I have one here. This is a 1937 production World War II gun that I've had for a long time. And then I also have one that Royal Tiger Imports sent me for this filming. It is a 1972 production. It's a commercial production example. It's one of the batch that have come in just recently onto the US collector market. So we're going to take a look at how these were developed, and basically I'm going to show you how these things are exactly the same. There's essentially no change from the World War II production to like 1980 when they finally stopped mass producing these things. So to start with, the Beretta 34 is really just kind of the final iteration of a series of pistols that Beretta began in 1915. They had a designer by the name of Tullio Marengoni, and his first pistol for Beretta was the model of 1915 in 32 ACP, and frankly, it looks like it's got a lot of distinctive elements that you can still see in the 34 version. They would go ahead and produce these for World War II, and then they would continue to iterate the guns. There's a 1922, 1923 pattern of gun where they improved on some of the World War I elements. There is then an iteration in 1931 where they take the 1920s pattern of the gun and they just keep tweaking it. They make some of the features better, a little more ergonomic. They enlarge the trigger guard. And for the 1931 version, they're making the gun in 32 ACP. This is a pistol that's kind of always available in two calibers. They'll make it in 32 and then either 380, or for a period they were making models in 9mm Glisenti, which is like underpowered 9 Parabellum. When we get to the 1930s pattern, they start with 32 ACP in 31. And then in 1932, they adapt the gun to 380 ACP, or as they call it, 9mm short. It's 9 by 17mm. And they develop that. There's the 1932 pattern Beretta is basically just a pre-production experimental version. There's barely 100 of them made, and they go on to become the model of 1934. So there's a little bit of a hiccup here. There's initially an Army contract for these, but then someone looks at a Walther PP and goes, ooh, we don't like the safety on these. Can you make it more Walther-ish? And I actually have a video on one of the resulting trials guns with a Walther style of safety on it. And then they go, never mind. We'll go back to the version you had. And that's the model of 1934. So it is formally adopted by the Italian, well, it's originally intended for the Italian police. The police like it. The police start buying them in 1935. The Army formally adopts it in 1936, but they actually start buying them before that. This turns into an extremely popular gun for the Italian military and also a bunch of other people. These are, by the time we hit 1940, the Italian Army has ordered just under 400,000 of them. So huge production, and they would continue to run this production at a really high rate all the way through World War II. There were a bunch of foreign contracts. There were like 40,000 of them sold to Romania. There was a smaller but substantial number sold to Finland for the Finnish Civil Guard. There were actually civilian production guns sold on the commercial market during the war, although not very many because of wartime exigencies, but they are out there. The Italians really liked this pistol. It worked very well for them. The Germans, as Italy's allies, really liked the Beretta 34. And they would actually, after Italy's armistice mid-war, the Germans occupied Beretta and had Beretta continue manufacturing both submachine guns and Model 34 pistols. There's like 53,000 more of them manufactured under German occupation at the very end of World War II. American troops, British troops who got their hands on these as souvenirs really liked them. They are fundamentally very simple, reliable, compact, like everything you actually need a handgun to do in a military sense. These do really quite well, and they're kind of bulletproof because they're very simple. They're cheap to make because they're kind of simple. So let's take a closer look and let me show you how these work, because there is in particular a cool trick of a sear mechanism inside them. All right, since I have this thing here, we're going to start with just a quick look at this. This is a Beretta model of 1915. It is unfortunately horribly refinished with this awful black paint, but you can see the open slide elements that will become very distinct in Beretta. We have the extractor fitted on the top here, heel magazine release, we have a safety out here, and a simple blowback action. This is, and mechanically inside, this is the same as what you'll see in the 34 in a minute. This is the stereotypical Beretta existing all the way back in 1915. Now, let's take a look at the model of 1934 specifically. This is my wartime one. This is my more commercial one. If we take a close-up look here on the wartime one, I've got the serial number on the one side. All right, then if we look at the other side, I apologize. Again, this one also has been badly refinished. Someone did the frame badly one way and the slide badly another way, so it's a little dim here. But P. Beretta, that's Pietro Beretta, caliber 9mm Corto, model 1934, and then patented. And then we have Gardone VT, that's Gardone Valtrompia, that's where this was manufactured in Italy. And then a date of 1937, and XV, that's the Roman numeral of the date of the fascist era in Italy. It's the 15th year, which would be 1937. Normally, you would have a couple of military adoption or proof marks back here. I think those are gone because this frame was badly refinished. You have a selector lever on the side, so that's the safe position, that's the fire position. This also doubles as a slide lock, which is pretty cool. We'll get to that in a minute. If we look at the modern one, or the more modern one, we have a serial number that is now just on the frame. They don't bother putting it on the slide. The slide markings are much simpler, but basically the same. PB for Pietro Beretta, caliber 9 Corto, that's 380, model 1934, and a date 1972. You can see the safety is mechanically the same, although it now has an arrow to tell you which position you're putting it in. The arrow to the red F is the fire position. The arrow to the non-marked S is the safe position. Since this was imported after 1968, it has to have a number of import markings on it, which Interord puts on the bottom of the trigger guard here. That's not a bad place to put them, kind of out of the way. And back here you do have an Italian proof mark on it. Now, when this became the model of 1934, developed from the previous pre-production 1932 pattern, they basically added two elements to it. One of them was a half-cock notch in the hammer, and the other was this steel backing to the grips instead of just having plain, at the time, wooden grips. So these are now a plastic grip with a steel backer, and you can see that that's exactly the same on guns that are like 40 years, well, 35 years apart and a world war separated from each other. They really did not change anything mechanical, I mean, almost anything stylistic on the pistols over that production time span. Sights are just a simple fixed post on the front and a drift adjustable rear notch. It is a single action gun. You have a single action hammer. There's no decocker. You have a heel magazine release. These have an open magazine. You can see how many cartridges are in them quite easily. They hold 7 rounds of .380. I should note there's a companion sort of model of 1935 that is essentially the exact same gun, but in 32 ACP. Those will hold 8 rounds. They're almost indistinguishable from the outside, the 34 and the 35. Now, one other element regarding the controls here, there's no slide release. The gun locks open on an empty magazine, but it is actually the magazine follower that holds it open. So when I take the magazine out, it just drops the slide, and there's no way to lock this. Well, there is a way to lock the slide on this open. It's by flipping that around, which we'll get to in just a moment. I've got the magazine out. I'm going to put this in the safe position, rack the slide, and you'll see that the lever here bumps up into the slide, holds it open. I then tap the barrel out backwards to remove it. That one's nice and loose. So the barrel comes out like that. I then go back here, flip that safety lever back around. Now the slide comes off the front of the gun. The recoil spring and guide rod come with it there. Then the safety lever actually comes out. This doubles as the retaining pin for the mainspring, and the mainspring is what puts pressure on the safety to lock it in either position. So there's a lot of double dipping and using parts for multiple purposes in this pistol. Marengoni was really quite a clever designer. Inside here we have a spring-loaded firing pin, so you can see it protrude there. There's no special firing pin block or anything. It's just a whole firing pin and a return spring in there, and it's held in place by that pin, which also holds the extractor in place. So once again, multi-purpose parts. Now let's take the grip panel off. So these grips have a little metal tongue. When you're reassembling it, that goes in first, down like that, and then the grip sits down in the back. So you can't just slap it on the top, or that little locking tab isn't in there. And you may notice on the left side grip, there's also this hexagonal cutout. That is specifically for that screw, because you do not want to tighten it all the way down. This is part of the clever and very simple, again, firing mechanism on the Beretta. So I'm going to hold the hammer back here for a minute. We have our trigger here, which pushes this backwards. That hits the sear right there, and you can see it's pivoting the sear. And when it does, the sear right in there is holding on to the hammer. So when the sear goes forward, it releases the hammer. You can't quite see the actual engagement notch because it's kind of down inside the frame right in here. But, all right, so what Marengoni did that's rather clever is he has this piece directly on this guy, which is being tensioned by the spring in the back here. So when I pull the trigger, you can see it's pivoting this forward right there, dropping the sear. This screw is actually kind of loose, as you can see there. If you tighten it all the way down, it will actually bind this piece. And that's why you have this little hexagonal cutout in the grip panel that prevents the screw from rotating. So you don't need to tighten it, you just need it lined up with that when you reassemble it. So I want it actually a little bit looser, right, probably right about there. All right, now if I go to pull the trigger, this lifts up right there. If the slide isn't in battery, it can't, and instead it will be pushed down, which drops it off of the sear here. So that's the out of battery safety. When the slide is fully forward, this slot lines up with that little finger and allows this piece to stay in line and actually fire. Now, if I take the grip panel off my World War II gun, my 1937 production, there you have exactly the same mechanism. And if I go back to my World War I model of 1915 and pull the grip panel off of it, what do you have? That same exact mechanism. A little bit different execution, the parts aren't interchangeable, but the idea here, the design, the fundamental design, goes all the way back to 1915. So there you go. There is essentially your eternally unchanging Beretta simple blowback pistol, in this case the model of 1934 iteration. This would be the last pistol of this specific type that Beretta would do, not counting the 32 caliber version, the 1935. After World War II, they would see the general worldwide trend in 9mm parabellum pistols, which really require a locked breech, and they would introduce the Beretta Model 1951 to fill that role. The 51 retains a lot of the characteristic Beretta elements like the open slide, but it adopts a Walther style of pivoting locking block and gets us away from this very simple blowback design. All right, so as I said at the beginning, a bunch of these came into the United States fairly recently, but what's interesting is they came into the US with threaded barrels. And if you look at them closely, some people will explicitly say this and some won't, the barrel threads are messed up. Like they're not good condition threads. You can't actually screw something onto them. And the reason for that is the threads are not factory original. The barrels were threaded so that they could be fitted with extended, like just smoothbore extensions that were then pinned and welded in place on the barrels in order to make the pistol longer. And that was done to meet US import laws. In 1968, when the Gun Control Act passed, it set forth a bunch of restrictions on importation of small, inexpensive handguns. And what ended up coming out of this was almost a spreadsheet style of form by which you have to fill this out to import a pistol, and depending on what features the pistol has, it will get a certain number of points, and you have to have 75 points to be able to legally import the pistol. Well, the Beretta 1934 is a pretty small, pretty lightweight pistol that doesn't have a lot of the features that are expressly looked for on this importation system. So it doesn't have target grips, it doesn't have a target trigger, it doesn't have target sights, it doesn't have a locked breech, it's small. By my count, a standard stock Beretta 34 gets 55 points on the import form, and it needs 75. Now, if you took a 5-inch long barrel extension and added it to the muzzle of this gun, that would get it to the requisite 75 points. I don't know exactly if that's specifically what they did, or if they also added some combination of adjustable rear sight or target grips. Those are the two usual things that are done to modify guns to allow them for import. Those things like target grips and target triggers and sights are typically pretty easy to add outside the country, import the guns, and then replace those parts with the original correct parts before they're sold to the public. But I have a suspicion here that all they did was just add a barrel extension, because it was one single thing that allowed them to get everything they needed. So this gets a little bit weirder because, according to US law, any handgun, any firearm that is over 50 years old or older, is considered a curio and relic firearm. And in the US, we have a specific license called a curio and relic license that allows people to purchase curio and relic firearms and have them delivered directly to their home address. It's a form of federal firearms license specifically for collectors. ATF stipulates that not only does the gun have to be 50 years old, it also has to be in its original configuration. This is something that was it came up a lot with like SKS rifles, where it was really easy to change configuration with different stocks or take bayonets off or things like that, and that could interfere with a gun's CNR status. Well, someone has determined that the threaded barrel on this Beretta 34 means that it is not in original configuration. And so regardless of how old these guns are, none of them are considered CNR guns as imported with those threaded barrels. However, if you manufacture a brand new barrel to the original specification and put that in, then the gun qualifies for CNR. So what you will see both at Royal Tiger, where this one came from, and the other places that are offering these pistols is typically two different options. If you want it on a CNR license, you'll have to pay a little bit more because it has a brand new production barrel in it. If you don't care about a CNR license and you're willing to just have it shipped to a commercial dealer for you, then you can get it a little cheaper, and it will have the original barrel with the mucked up threading on the end of it as an artifact of the importation shenanigans. So that's what's going on with these. It's really a goofy thing that in order to have the curio and relic status, you have to put a brand new barrel in it instead of having the original one. But that is how legislation often works, unintended consequences and loopholes and such. So thanks to Royal Tiger for sending this one over for me to do some filming with. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.